And hello there, my friend, and welcome to Book Talks with Keith. I'm your host, author J. Keith Brown, and you can find out about me and my books at jkeithbrown.com. So I hope that you'll take a moment to go to that website and check out my books that are available now for you. But the reason this podcast exists, if you have been a listener, hopefully you have enjoyed some of the authors that we have brought to you on a weekly basis. And we're going to continue that for a while longer. And today I have got another fabulous author that I want to introduce to you. And her name is Zen Ashe. Zen, welcome to Book Talks with Keith.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I just want to give myself a pat on the back that I got the name right. I rehearsed it. Zen and I went over this a few times before we hit record, and I practiced. So brownie points for Keith today, right?
Hey, brownie points for Keith today.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast. And I want people to get to know you and a little bit about you and your background. So enlighten us. Tell us who Zen is.
Well, I have been in public school education for almost 30 years, and I just retired last year. I'm doing substitute teaching now, so I took about 10 months off where I was just doing my own thing. I am an activist as well, so I'm actually the Houston organizer for 100,000 Poets for Change, which is an artivism group, was worldwide. And I also do writing workshops. So I'm a writing consultant for Write About Now Poetry and also with Write Space Houston. And I also am a spoken word artist and a voiceover artist and an author. So I do quite a few things.
I understand. I'm right there with you. I can't even put them all on the same page, all the things that I do right now. So I get it. And that's part of being the creative mind that
Mm,
we are, as authors, because our minds are always going 90 miles an hour if you're anything like me. And you've always got these creative juices flowing, and we have to have ways to get those out. So you do that in a variety of ways. You do that through your poetry, and you're doing it through your wedding planning, and obviously as a teacher for 30 years, having had an education background as well in part of my years. I want to just say thank you for that. I know how hard that work is. And so, congratulations on making it to retirement.
yes, yes. I actually am thinking about going back in so that I could maybe put a few more years in and like pay off my house, pay off my car, get out of debt, and then,
Right.
in a sense, retire again.
I hear you. Well, good
Yeah.
for you. I tell you, it is an interesting place to be these days. So that's all I can say. And you really have to have a love for it. So I thank you for your service to the kids in your area. So when did your love for what did you? And by the way, what did you teach in school? What was the subject matter?
I taught English. I also
Oh,
taught
okay,
English as a second language.
okay,
And I did a lot of electives related to English. So I've taught mythology, I've taught multicultural literature, I've taught SAT and ACT prep. I've even
gotcha.
taught a goal setting class,
Wow,
which was it was one of those classes to prep you for college where you
yeah,
learn like study skills and
right.
goal setting, anger management, decision making, time management. So we kind of had all these different little units to try to prep the kids going into college. A lot of them didn't have any, some people are not raised with life skills in a sense, and they
Exactly.
kind of wing it. And so this
Mhm.
was kind of a class to try to help them make that transition from seniors to adult living without them crashing and burning, for a couple of years.
Right.
So I taught a class like that as
That's
well.
that's great. That's really good. That's really good. I know that for one of my stays in education, I was teaching algebra and drama and debate. See how those fit together for you. So I
Wow.
I understand. So anyway, but so obviously, as an English teacher, you have a love for the written word. You have a love for the English language. And so, tell me what inspired the create. I know as an English teacher, having to go through your education and teach English, it's a very analytical process for a lot of that. It's very, grammar and all these things. So a lot of rules and regulations. So I'm wondering, how did the creative side of the writing come into play? When did that first start, and what do you think was the catalyst for that?
Well, actually, the creative side came first. I was one of those kids who did a lot of writing.
Mhm.
I wrote a lot in elementary school, even got awards in elementary school, and I wanted to be a writer in the very beginning, but everyone around me kept saying that wasn't a real job and I wouldn't be able to make a living at it. And I didn't, I was one of those very introverted children, and I kind of was one of the rule followers. And so I just kind of did what my parents and elders told me to do. And they were like, get a job that pays the
Mhm.
bills.
That's
And
what we were
so
told. Yes.
yeah, I went into teaching because I still love language, as you said,
Mhm.
but and I love teaching, but it didn't fulfill the part of me that the creative side was still there. I couldn't. More and more and more, teaching has become narrower, and it's you can't even say a lot of things. You can't even read a lot of things. You can't even discuss a lot of things now. Everything is so politically charged. They make politics and everything. So that made it harder and harder and harder for me as a person who really got into education as a way to share my love of writing and literature and kind of spark that in children. So I actually would say that getting divorced was my kind of green light to say, okay, I've done everything I was told to do. I was told to get a good job, get married, have kids, you'll be happy. And I did those things. I was a good church going girl, doing all that stuff. And it didn't work for me. So when I got divorced, I was like, okay, I'm going to throw all these, you know, rules out of my head and say, okay, let me start over trying to live a life that really reflects my dreams, my goals, my feelings. And so at 43 was when I first started to perform
Mhm.
and publish. And so that was when I really decided, okay, I'm not going to listen to all of the naysayers that have told me no all my life. I'm going to just, you know, be a
Right.
little kid like la 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 la.
Like many of those students you had over those 30 years,
And I'm
probably.
going to tune them out, and I'm going to go for it because I don't want to be on my deathbed wondering what could have happened. And I'm so glad I did because my life is so different now than it was at 43. I'm 53 now, so the last 10 years have been amazing just because I actually went for the things that I had put on the shelf previously and told myself, no, I'm not going to do that. Everybody says that that's not going to work. Yeah.
And so you started with, you said performance, and I assume you were performing your poetry. Is that what it was? You published
Yes, I
poetry and
had
performed
been
that.
I had been journaling my whole life. I had
Mhm.
been dabbling a little bit in writing my whole life, but um I really wanted to get on open mics and things like that. And so that was where I really fell in love with performing poetry. In the beginning, I was just reading it because I was spoken word artist, like they kind of, I was like, oh, like I could never do that. But I had memorized so many things. My mom told me, and she's passed on now, but she was like, you could recite whole portions of Shakespeare. What are you talking about? You
Wow.
can't recite your own. So she's
Mhm.
like, you've memorized so much stuff. What are you talking about? How could you not just memorize your own things and perform them? And she was right. And when she said that to me, it was kind of funny because the same people that were originally telling me I
That's
couldn't be a
exactly
writer,
what I was going to say.
yeah,
It's
the same
interesting
people
that,
telling me I
yeah.
couldn't do it were later like, what are you talking about? Why
Wow.
are you not doing this?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it was
for
it was
sure.
really hilarious. So I was kind of looking at them like a side eye, like, but there you go. So she actually, her and my sister were like my first cheerleaders, surprisingly, which blew my mind. And
Mhm.
there's a book, The Alchemist. I don't know if you've read it, but one of the main things that I got from that book, it says something like, when you make a decision to go for your goals, the whole universe conspires to help you. And that was like my first example of that happening when my naysayers begin to say, what are you talking about? Stop being scared, just go do it you know
Yeah, those
so
right people will come along, right? For
yeah.
sure. But it is interesting that the people that, And what they did early in your life was done out of love. I mean, it was done out of protection for you, and they gave you the wisdom that they had and what they thought, and probably it was pretty good advice. I mean, you did make a long career out of it and did well
Hmm.
for yourself, but it is interesting that they came along and said, you've done this, but we also know you had this other in you. And for them to recognize that and encourage that, props to them. So tell mom and sis, good job, right? So yeah, good for them. So you started, was the poetry put in collections, or was it just published in certain, like online and different collections there, or how did that work?
So when I first started submitting my work, I was submitting to anthologies and
Okay.
literary journals,
Mhm.
and some of them were online, some of them were in print. So the first 12 things that I published were either in anthologies or literary journals all over the United States.
Wow.
And that kind of gave me, I guess, some validation that my work
Sure.
was really good because I was submitting it. And because I had submitted in college and then I kind of moved away from it, got married, like I said, had kids and all that stuff. And so I had only had like three acceptances up to the age of 43. And then, like, within 10 months of me kind of really making the decision that I was going to really pour my heart into this, I had 10 acceptances in 10 months. And,
Wow.
and so it kind of just shows you what can happen when you believe in yourself and when you kind of, your attitude changes and
Okay.
you're
So
not as
hang on just a minute there, because I want to make sure, dear listener, did you just hear what Zen just told you?
mm,
When you make that decision and you put your whole heart into something, it's amazing how things will begin to align for you. And that's exact and the rewards will come if you don't give up and you keep after it. And that's exactly what happened to you. And you're a wonderful example of that, Zen. So thank you for sharing that.
well, thank you. And so I was performing, I was being published in, like I said, anthologies and literary journals. And then quarantine happened, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So I had gotten to the point where I had actually made a business out of performing. I was putting on live comedy, music, and poetry shows. I was doing the poetry, and I had other artists come in to do comedy and music. And so now it had become like a second job for me. And I was also working on my exit plan from education because, as I said, it was becoming very stifling in education,
Hmm.
and I wanted to get out. But I
Understand.
needed, like, what is my second career going to be? What am I going to do after this?
Hmm.
So when quarantine happened, of course, there were no live shows left. For 8 months, we were stuck in our house, and we couldn't do anything, go anywhere. So a lot of people had come to my shows and they had said, hey, you are really inspiring. You're very motivational. You have a great voice. You should do a podcast. And so I took a podcasting class while I was sitting at home during quarantine. And I decided that I wanted to have a podcast that was focused on what we could still do even in quarantine. We could work on self care, which we all needed because it was extremely stressful time.
Absolutely.
We could work on self empowerment and self development. And so we could work on the mindset, that we had. And so I kind of went A to Z through self development topics. And so I started that in 2020. And so now, we're in our fourth year and I'm only
Nice.
in like letter I. So we still got a whole lot of topics to go. So we're
Very
working,
good.
basically A to Z with self development topics. But because of that, I began to talk a lot about journaling because I told you I had always journaled. And a lot of people stuck at home were now, okay, I've never journaled, but I've got time to do it. Can you teach me? And so actually the first book that I ever wrote was a guided journal, which was kind of funny because I always thought I was going to write fiction, but this was actually my first book that I wrote, which was called Synergize Your Life.
If you're on the podcast, you can't see this, but if you are on
Yeah.
YouTube, she is holding it up. Beautiful cover, by the way.
Yes. So, and the idea was kind of the butterfly effect. You see the ripples on the water,
Hmm.
and that basically small changes can lead to big results. So this was just a concept that went with my podcast. And I had been journaling, like I said, my whole life, but I had bought a lot of guided journals and never finished them. because most were 365 pages. Most were focused on one type of journaling, like write 3 things you're grateful for every day, write 3 goals every day, write, 3 habits that you want to change. It was very, very repetitive. So mine was topical. And also it focused on the way that we learn. I mean, like I said, I had been in education for 20 something, 27 years, I think, by the time I published this. So we learn through role models. So who are going to be your role models in this area? There was places to put, like, for this specific topic, who could be your role model? Songs. We teach little kids songs. The first thing you learn is A, B, C, D. Okay, so what songs would motivate you in that area? Movies. We learn a lot through movies and TV shows, books. So basically it had places to put movies that you wanted to watch, books. It had actual journal prompts and it had food for thought, but it had a lot of other things that ways that we learn, you know. And so it was very unique in that way. And so that's kind of how I was teaching people to journal, to make their whole life, like, play your song in the morning when you're thinking about this particular topic, say affirmations. I talked about meditation, breath work. So all of that stuff is in the guided journal.
Gotcha.
And so that one, through the podcast, it actually went international before I wasn't even getting that many sales here, but I was getting sales in India and Canada and all over the world. And it debuted at number 9 in Mind, Body, and Spirit and New Thought,
Nice.
So that was my first Amazon bestseller.
Good job. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny how that works. Yeah, one of my books is no longer in print, was actually sold more in, I think it was New Zealand or Australia, than any other place in the world. And it's kind of weird how that happens because I've never been there and I didn't
Yeah.
reach out to people. But yeah, but that's kind of exciting. So you started with that, and where did it
Mhm.
go from there in your book career?
Well, after that one, I started doing workshops with that, and I was already doing, like I said, the live shows. So after quarantine, I still kept going with the podcast, and I started doing workshops with the guided journal. So I was actually walking people through it. We were doing journaling as a group. We were doing breath work, meditation, all this stuff as a group. Brainstorming songs, role models, movies, all that stuff. So we're doing it as a group. So that was really fun. And then people kept saying, "Where's your poetry book?" I didn't have one. so, um, so then I was going through a lot of things. I lost a lot of people, during quarantine and prior to that. So after my divorce in the 7-year period, from 2014 to 2021, I actually lost 13 people that were very close to me in my life, family members and close friends.
Wow.
And so I was every time I kind of dealt with one loss and kind of got my breath back, someone else was lost. And this was like my mother, my father, my grandparent. And these were like big, figures in my life.
Right.
My ex-husband, my in-laws, so these were like I said, very pivotal people. So when I decided to write my poetry book, I decided to incorporate some of my journals into it and write it as a memoir. So I ended up writing what I call my personal healing journey. This is actually my poetry book, but it's 7 years
Wow.
of my life.
Wow.
It's got 97 poems in it. And every chapter ends with a lesson, a little light bulb moment.
Hmm.
And it also is just like my podcast, it's A to Z. So there's 26 chapters. So the first chapter is attitude, because it begins the day I got divorced. And the very first thing I had to work on was my attitude. So you see me go from this very low self-esteem person who feels like a failure to me actually realizing what I have now that I thought I had lost because I had gotten divorced. So you see this transformation in chapter 1. And so every chapter chapter 2 is boldness. So I began to become bolder and going for my dreams. You see me go through not only healing from divorce, but becoming a spoken word artist, becoming an author, dealing with these losses, starting to online date,
Oh
and
yeah.
meeting all kinds of interesting people and thinking about how the whole dating landscape and relationships have changed
Mm.
since I, was married and now I'm divorced and I'm in my 40s. And it was very different, prior to that. So you see all of these transitions. My kids, are adults now. They left the nest, came back, left the nest, came back. I become a grandmother. So it's so many things that happen in here. So, people will come up to me, they'll say to me, I hear you have a book about divorce recovery. Yes. I hear you have a book about grief recovery. Yes. I hear you have a book about becoming an entrepreneur. Yes. You know, it's
Right.
all.
All
I hear you
inclusive.
have a book about struggles in education. Yes. So it's literally, it encapsulates all the things I was going through. So there's a lot of people that pick it up for a lot of different
Different
reasons,
reasons. Right. I can see that.
and
So
then they'll give it to other people.
tell me again the name of that, Zen, because I'm not sure
This
we even
book is called Plenty of Guppies and Other Dating Misadventures. Lust, Loss, and Lessons of Love from 101 Dates, a memoir told in poetry and prose. Because actually, in 7 years, I actually went on 147 dates.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yes,
that's
I'm
about
sure that
21
there's a
a
lot of
year.
stuff you can write about. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff I can write about. But it's
Exactly.
not just a book about dating. Like I said, it's all these different transitions
Right.
that I went through. So that was actually really my own healing journey, because as I was writing it, I was kind of reflecting and processing and coalescing all of these different things that had happened to me into something that was very cogent and was very, it was helpful for me to understand. And it
Hmm.
was helpful for everybody else to understand, because it was a way to make sense of this 7 year period of my life. And I think seven is a number of completion.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that was my second book that I wrote.
Oh, great, great. Now, have there been others since then?
Yeah, I have four more. So I wrote the next one that I wrote. This was a book that I wrote because I think a lot of us, we grew up with some issues if we had a dysfunctional family. My issue was feeling like I had to earn love and that I was never really good enough. So this book is called You Are Wanted and Loved Because You're You. And so on the cover, you have, these are actually my grandkids, but you can see over here, you got the moon and you got the sun, you got it raining in the middle. So whether it's night or day, whether it's raining on you, there's a rainbow. Basically, there is an upside. You are still valuable. And it's actually an illustrated poem, and it actually has affirmations in it. So
Is that for children or
this
adults?
is for children, but I have a lot of adults that buy it
Okay, that's what
because
I was just wondering because the way you
yeah,
were talking about it. Yeah. Okay.
what'll happen is they'll read some of it and then they'll say, I need this book.
I got you.
I need this book. So
I
I've
got
had a
you.
lot of adults buy it and say, I was going to give it to my granddaughter, but I got to buy another one for her because I'm keeping this one for me.
Right. Fantastic.
And
Fantastic.
and I wrote it with kind of that in mind because I called it a whole family tale, because my goal was in writing it that if you are an adult and you're reading it to a child, it's going to minister to you. It's going to help heal you. So it's going to be good for them to hear, but as you're reading it, you're going to be hearing the message yourself.
Gotcha.
And so I wanted it to be something where, because some, we all have been parents, those of us that are parents, and we've read some children's books and we're like, oh my God, I got to read that thing again. I hate that, and we just hate it. And I know but the kid loves it, and we're sitting there going, why couldn't they love a different book? Because this one,
I
and
know.
I wanted it to be where the parents would be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and read this to my kid, but I'm going to get something out of it because I
Good.
need to hear this too.
Right. Well, that's great. That's
So
great.
it's a rhyming book like Dr. Seuss, but it has some very powerful messages and it has affirmations in it. So I thought it would be wonderful if kids could you know how they remember a lot of things and they recite a lot of things, if they would be reciting things that are really positive about themselves, you know.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So,
Very cool. Very cool.
and
All
I
right.
have a planner. So this is an undated planner. This takes you through the whole year. It does have reflection pages, 4 different reflection pages for each week. It also has personal and professional planning, and it has a journaling page for each month.
Mm,
So there's a different journaling topic, you know, for each month, and there's different little self-care, self-empowerment, self-development activities in there. I have another book that I just released, and I just released it so, you know, close to right now that I don't even have a physical copy of it yet. I'm waiting. It's supposed to be here February 2nd. So, but it is on Amazon, and it actually is on the bestsellers list right now in poetry in new releases.
nice.
So it was number
Wonderful.
6 the last time I checked.
Wow.
So
So, man, you have been busy, Zen. My goodness, you have put out a lot of material. So,
yes, yeah.
congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. And, it's interesting because you have written some different things, all with that same drive and passion, but they have that passion and drive and growth has given birth in different styles and different purpose books. So it's kind of interesting that you have this wide array. So, and folks, we'll make sure that in the show notes you get all the links to be able to grab any of these books. If you heard something that goes, even if like it's the one that she says is for kids and adults, that adults that maybe say I want to read that to my grandchild. So yeah, I mean we'll make sure that you have a way to grab that and support Zen and her writing, but also something that hopefully will speak to you and bless you. Well, that is good. I tell you what, I'm getting tired just seeing all that stuff because I know personally how hard it is to put a book out. And so you've been putting all this stuff out. So congratulations on that. That is
Thank
so
you.
wonderful. And so is there any words of wisdom that you would like to give anybody today based on this whole journey that you've been on, not only personally and your personal growth, but in the creativity that's come from that? Is there one sage advice that you would like to give the listener today as we sort of wrap this up on the podcast episode?
Well, I would just say it's never too late to start, and also whatever you feel passionate about is the message that I feel that you need to give to the world. I think that every one of us has our own little niche that only we can speak to. You know, I may be in the self-help arena, and there's so many books in that arena, but there's not any books exactly like mine. And I think that everybody could say that about their books. They're coming from their perspective with their experience. And so I believe that your voice is powerful and it needs to be heard. And so I don't think you should ever discount it or think that it doesn't matter, because I think that it really does. And we need people to share their light and their truth.
Amen to that. I agree completely. Well, Zen Ashe, I appreciate you being a guest on Book Talks with Keith. It is a pleasure to meet you, and been a fascinating conversation. I've enjoyed hearing not only about your books, but I've enjoyed hearing about your passion and the healing journey. I mean, I love to hear people that have gone through hardships and have gone through things and come out stronger, and in some ways better, than they were before. They haven't let these hard times bring them down, but give them a chance to be lifted up and to accomplish. So thank you for sharing that. That's inspiration in itself. But then your books, obviously, they're doing great on Amazon. So folks, you need to go pick one up. We'll make sure all the links are in there. Zen, thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Hang on a minute. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping once I stop the recording. But
Okay.
for listener, thank you again for listening to this podcast. This was a labor of love for me. I don't get anything from it. I just wanted to get on here and meet some fabulous people like we have done today with Zen Ashe coming on the podcast. Hopefully, you've enjoyed our conversation. You'll support her and her work. And, if you can, go support me too. I wouldn't mind a bit. jkeithbrown.com, by the way. All right. So until next time, keep reading and help us keep spreading the love of books. Blessings, my friends. We'll talk next time.